Let's continue our discussion of Emily Falk's book, What We Value. Today is the fourth part of our interpretation. The core idea of this book is that within the brain, there exists a hardware-based value system. For every option we encounter, this system computes its value by weighting and summing various cues. But because the brain cannot process too many factors at once, this process often goes wrong. For instance, we tend to overestimate factors related to me or us, and we often focus too much on what's right in front of us. Once we understand this, we can influence other people's value judgments. By, for example, linking something to them personally, or by guiding their attention toward a specific factor. Today, however, we turn to something even larger. How the value system shapes the self. If someone has a flaw, how do you help them change? Or even harder, how do you change yourself? I believe there's a bigger picture here. A person's self needs pruning. Just like the body. Maybe there's too much fat here, not enough muscle there. It needs training. Your self needs regular training too, and that training is rarely comfortable. The greatest difficulty is that, the brain's self-system and value system overlap heavily. As a result, we automatically overvalue anything that belongs to us. Daniel Kahneman and Dan Ariely both describe a phenomenon called the endowment effect. When you're given a random coffee mug, if asked to sell it, you might price it at $20. But if you don't have it and are asked how much you'd pay for it, you'd say it's worth only $10. That's why so many people can't throw away junk. From useless souvenirs to old-school notebooks. Not because they're frugal, but because those things aren't mine. And if a person can't even part with literal junk, how could they easily give up their personality flaws? Tell someone, your temperament hurts your work, you should change, and they'll likely get angry. They'll feel you're attacking their very identity. If someone points out your own flaws, even with good intentions, you might react the same way. Falk offers two strategies. Affirm the core, and step outside the self. Let's start with affirming the core. Whether you want to help someone change or negotiate with them, you must distinguish between core and peripheral traits. The core is non-negotiable, the periphery is flexible. It's like diplomacy. Nations emphasize their core interests that are non-discussable, but everything else is open for negotiation. People are the same. Each person has a few core traits in their self-image that are unshakable and immune to criticism, and many peripheral traits that can be adjusted. We do this distinction intuitively. If you see yourself as a kind person, someone can tell you your desk is messy. That's fine, it's peripheral. But if they say you intentionally mess up the office, you'll be furious. If you see yourself as creative, someone saying you procrastinate is tolerable, but saying your work is tasteless strikes directly at your core. So when we say, criticize the issue, not the person, we're really saying, address the periphery, not the core. The good news is, core traits are few, and they're usually positive. They don't need fixing. What needs pruning is the periphery. There's a fascinating method called values affirmation. One of the most effective persuasion techniques discovered so far. Before pointing out someone's flaws or asking them to improve, affirm their core values. In one study, participants first listed their personal values and identified which ones mattered most to them. Then, they heard a simple health message. Prolonged sitting is bad for you, you should exercise more. Those who did the values affirmation first showed a significant increase in exercise over the following month, while the control group barely changed. Remarkably, this effect held even when the message had nothing to do with the affirmed values. Why? Because affirmation gives people an anchor. A sense of internal stability. No matter how rough the conversation gets, they know their core remains intact. I'm still me. That stability breeds openness. The key is that the affirmed values must come from the person themselves, not slogans imposed by others. So if you're heading into a difficult conversation, first take a few minutes alone to recall your core values. That will keep you grounded. Then, when the conversation begins, affirm their core values and show respect. Many studies show that after affirming the core, people are more receptive to criticism, more willing to listen, and more likely to change. The order matters. Affirm the core first, then give feedback. If you start with criticism, the defense mechanism kicks in, and by the time you add affirmation, it's too late. This is similar to David Yeager's transparency statement technique in How to Motivate 10 to 25-year-olds. When police officers approach someone in a community, they should begin with, "I just want to learn more about this neighborhood." That single sentence lowers defensiveness and opens communication. Same principle. And the effects of affirmation accumulate. In one study, college freshmen, who did a brief values affirmation exercise early on, developed a small but lasting sense of belonging. Repeating the exercise before each exam or major event further strengthened that belonging, and their performance steadily improved, while students without such affirmation often declined. So why not give yourself the same affirmation? Whenever you enter a new environment, a new school, a new job, a new city, take a moment to ask yourself, what truly matters to me? Who am I? Find your anchor, and you'll feel grounded. Broadly speaking, this helps you discover your purpose. As we've discussed throughout this series, having a sense of purpose helps you live longer. As Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." If you can endure any how, you can certainly accept criticism. Among all values, those tied to self-transcendence, love for family and friends, empathy for others, a sense of connection to the larger world, are the most powerful in reducing threat and defensiveness. That brings us to the second method of pruning the self. Stepping outside the self. This skill has several levels, from simple to advanced. At the simplest level, find a role model. As Shane Parrish says in Clear Thinking, role models give you a higher standard to live by. Falk's idea is similar. Whenever you face a challenge, ask, what would my role model do? Your role model doesn't have to be a famous hero. It could be a friend. In one experiment, participants were asked how they felt about a situation, then asked how their friend would feel in the same situation, and finally asked again about their own feelings. Their answers shifted toward their friend's perspective. Merely imagining another person's viewpoint can change your own emotions and judgments. The key mechanism is shifting perspective. Not viewing everything solely from I. A more advanced level is to go further. Look at yourself in third person. When NBA star LeBron James had to decide whether to stay in Cleveland or join the Miami Heat, he told reporters, "One thing I didn't want to do was make an emotional decision. I wanted to do what's best for LeBron James and to do what makes LeBron James happy." Research confirms this works. Referring to yourself in third person during emotional moments reduces negativity and helps you make more rational decisions. It's a form of cognitive reappraisal. It creates distance between me and the problem. With that distance, emotions lose their grip and clarity returns. You can even go further. Observe your emotions with curiosity, like a scientist. That's the essence of mindfulness. You can ask, what are my core values? Which traits truly define me? Which ones can I let go of? That's how you prune the self. We've discussed 2 ways to prune the self. Affirm the core. Recognize that not all your traits define who you are. And step outside the self. View I more objectively in your value judgments. The first anchors you, providing stability and safety. The second lifts you, creating distance and perspective. One grounds you, the other frees you. Together, they make you steady yet flexible. Here's a practical example. You're a manager dissatisfied with an employee's recent performance. Invite them into your office and first ask them to name 3 things from the past 6 months they're most proud of. Affirm their core traits through those stories. That's the first move. Many managers praise before critique, but the key is to affirm the core, not superficial things. Then, present objective data. Performance metrics, project outcomes, etc. But don't say, look how poorly you did. Instead, use the second move. If you were a partner reviewing this report, what would you think? Let them see themselves from a third-person perspective. The emotional tension drops, and you can focus on concrete improvements. The same works for parents and children. Mutually affirm each other's core values, then discuss issues from each other's viewpoint. Even in third person. And watch how the conversation transforms. Finally, a few words about the self. We often talk about overcoming ego, and Buddhism teaches no self. So is the self merely a burden? Not really. The self integrates your personal narrative. It gives meaning and purpose to your life. That integration fuels motivation, provides emotional resilience, and keeps you from collapsing under setbacks. We all need self-esteem and a degree of defensiveness. Even though identity politics can be divisive, a sense of identity is still valuable. It helps you belong, cooperate, and trust. So yes, you need a self. But without moderation, the self swells into attachment. You may cling to a fixed life story, rejecting any new chapter. Your identity may become narrow and fragile. A small criticism may pierce your defenses. Just as we shouldn't let our bodies accumulate excess fat, we shouldn't let ourselves grow heavy and rigid. We want a self that's strong yet flexible, capable of understanding others from many perspectives, emotionally resilient yet always growing. A self that's both powerful and elastic. Pruning unnecessary traits makes the core stronger. I don't believe in body shaming. I think fat can be beautiful. Likewise, small flaws in character are fine. Sometimes, our weaknesses are byproducts of our strengths. But you can always feel whether your self is healthy. And that feeling is the truest signal from your value system. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.